We continue with our second presenter in this session, with Giovanni Abramo, and he's going to speak about peer review versus scientometric research assessment.
Good morning, everybody. I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me to this interesting conference on research assessment. A few words about myself. I'm a researcher on research evaluation. Particularly, my research focuses on evaluative scientometrics and conflict of interest disclosure. I'm currently the president of the International Society for Scientometrics and Informetrics. About 20 years ago, I founded a spin-off startup when I worked at the National Research Council of Italy. And this company has got a license agreement with Clarivate to get Web of Science bibliographic data. And we conduct every year a bibliometric research assessment of Italian universities. And so I am a kind of scientist who applies the state of the art into practice, okay? I will consider there is plenty of studies on the pros and cons of peer review and bibliometric methods to assess research, but very few of them concentrate. Most of them concentrate on the intrinsic characteristics of these two methods, but very few of them concentrate on the implementation of the two methods and the pros and cons of the two methods from the perspective of their implementation. And this is what I'm trying to do in my talk. I will, you know that the debate is an everlasting debate. And this has been recently reignited by the setup of this COARA, the Coalition for Reforming Research Assessment. And I will spend some time to analyze critically this coalition. And I will base my analysis on theoretical frameworks, empirical evidence, and internal logic arguments. And I will refer only to the COARA webpage, all documents produced by COARA, but not to interpretation by single supporter or a specialist. I will then spend some time to analyze more in depth peer review versus scientometrics, and I will conclude with final remarks. The origins and aim of the COARA initiative. The European Research Area 2020-2024 policy agenda outlines 20 actions to align research policies and programs across European countries for collective effectiveness. One of these actions, Action 3, is titled Advance Towards the Reform of the Assessment System for Researchers and Institutions to Improve Their Quality, Performance, and Impact. And this action highlights the necessity for reforming research evaluation. To pass from words to facts, in 2022, a coalition for advancing research assessment, QARA, was established. The composition is made mainly by research institutions, universities, and funders. The objective is reforming research assessment. So the time frame is 5 years. And the key document is an agreement outlining principles and commitments. And to date, over 600 mainly European organizations became member. The coalition has a vision, and the vision is that the assessment of researchers, and research organizations recognizes the diverse outputs, practices, and activities that I can't read it, that maximize the quality and impact of research. This requires basing assessment primarily on qualitative judgment, for which peer review is central, supported by responsible use of quantitative indicators. Of course, there was a response to this initiative, and we had various reactions. Quantitative metrics advocates emphasize the potential benefits with rigorous and field normalized metrics, Ioannidis and Maniadas. Critic Torres, Salinas, Arroyo Machado, and Robin Garcia likening it to Scientometric denialism. Call for dialogue was by Rushforth, who invited constructive dialogue. And now I will analyze this initiative more in depth. My first reflection concerns the very creation of QARA. In the presence of an established epistemic community in research evaluation, including evaluative Scientometrics, which has contributed for decades to advancing research assessment, the formation of a coalition of users with the same mission appears contradictory. This is like saying to infectious diseases scientists during the peak of the COVID-19 pandemic, it's like saying, okay, guys, we have hidden so far, now take a walk on the wild side, and we leave the patients find the vaccine, okay? This is something like that to me. Put aside the scientists and let the user find the solution to the problem, if there is a problem. Possible explanations of this: ERA policymakers are not fully aware of developments in the science of research evaluation in general and evaluative Scientometrics in particular, or harbor misconceptions about the Scientometrician's competence in research assessment due to their quantitative approach, or successful lobbying activities by associations such as the European University Association, Science Europe, etc., were among the first promoters of QARA. I don't find any other explanations apart from these for a decision that I find really worrisome. Let's go back to the coercion vision statement. There is a syllogism here. The premise is that citation-based metrics can only assess index publications. And this is true. And research outputs extend, that's premise 2, extend beyond index publication. So the conclusion is base assessment primarily on qualitative judgment, for which peer review is central. Let's analyze this syllogism. How many research works can peers reasonably assess in practice? The opportunity cost, as Professor Ioannidis said, of reviewing is exceptionally high. In 2020, reviewers worldwide dedicated over 100 million hours to peer reviews for journals alone, equivalent to more than 15,000 years. And we are talking about reviewing for journals alone, or other reviews, engagement of experts to assess the grants requests, assess their participation in experts committee to recruitment, so on. In 2020, the monetary value of the time invested by reviewers in the United States exceeded $1 billion US dollars. And this is not the opportunity cost, which is much higher. That's just the cost of the wages, the salaries of these experts. The number of articles published in 2022 was 40% higher than in 2016, surpassing the limited or negligible growth in the count of active scientists. And this is a trend which is going to grow. I receive an invitation for review every other day. I don't know about you. So due to the cost and time constraints, all national peer review assessments have limited the number of works that can be submitted. In the latest Italian National Research Evaluation Exercise, the VQR, in STEM fields, which represent 75% of all Italian research, 98% of submitted works were journal articles. Scientists were required to submit 3 works in a 5-year period, their best works, and 98% of them were journal articles. 99% of submitted journal articles in STEM were indexed in Scopus or Web of Science. Index publication received high quality scores on average 0.76 compared to non-indexed works, which received an average score of 0.65. Furthermore, studies shows that there is a strong correlation between the number of indexed and non-indexed works produced by scientists. So in the Italian latest research assessment exercise, over 182,000 works were assessed. Each member of expert committees reviewed about 400 works in 6 to 7 months. If I were a reviewer in these expert panels, I would have reviewed papers in, this is my field of research is managerial engineering. So I would have reviewed papers in marketing, production, finance, research, management, and so on. That is papers in which I would have no expertise at all. Reviewer demographics. 97.6% of reviewers were Italian. Questions raised. Was this a genuine peer review process or a flawed scientometric assessment? And how competent were the reviewers? They were all Italians. When you want to have your paper assessed, you want to be, that it is assessed by a competent reviewer. I doubt that 97% of these reviewers were competent on those papers. So, base assessment primarily on qualitative judgment for which peer review is central is not justified in STEM. That is in 75% of research products. So is there an implicit resistance to metric-based assessments? Mark Shields one of the promoter of Quora, this is from the Quora Web Science, states publish or perish and metrics have led us into a blind alley. Key insights. According to Shields, the primary focus for reform in research assessment should be the metrics themselves, not just the users who may lack the required expertise to apply the metrics. This is somewhat analogous to suggesting that the problem of resistance in specific pathogens lies with the antibiotics themselves, rather than with those who use them excessively, inappropriately, and without medical consultation. This is what I read from the Agreement on Reform in Research Assessment. Abandon inappropriate use in research assessment of journal and publication-based metrics, in particular, inappropriate uses of journal impact factor and H index. Who is Quora addressing? Hopefully their members, not evaluated scientometricians. The journal impact factor is not being conceived to assess individual performance. It has been conceived to assess the prestige of journals. And the H index is the product is an invention of a physicist who made an inroad in Scientometrics with 2 papers. So with little knowledge about economics. So for scientometricians, they are inventing the wheel. By the way, the journal impact factor is fundamental, together with early citation, to predict the future scholarly impact of publications. There is reflection number 4. There is an apparent contradiction arising from the fact that the reform or research assessment is advocated and expected to be conceived and executed by those who have formulated the very research assessments deemed in need for reform. Reflections number 5. Basing assessment primarily on qualitative judgment for which peer review is central. Let's consider a scenario where a national government or a research organization aims to enhance international research collaboration, cross-sector collaboration, interdisciplinary research, or cross-field scientific impact. Is peer review capable of assessing the achievement of these objectives compared to scientometric techniques? Reflection number 6. Can anyone reasonably think of a research assessment universally applicable in every context or circumstance? The formulation of a research assessment exercise should take into consideration the objectives of the evaluation, the intended use of its results, the technical specification, the scale of the research assessment, research fields to be assessed, the granularity of these research fields, timeliness of the assessment, how much time is allotted to experts to conduct the evaluation, the minimum acceptable accuracy level of the assessment, the financial resources available for the assessment, the data available, the cultural context. This is fundamental. I mean, it's thinking of a standardized research assessment is something, well, useless. I mean, reflection number 7. Basing assessment primarily on qualitative judgment for which peer review is central, supported by responsible use of quantitative indicators. I always thought about this, the informed peer review supported by quantitative indicators, but how is this implemented? Should metrics be utilized when reviewers disagree, similar to the past UK ref? Or should metrics be used independently to contribute to determining the final quality score? And what specific metric should be made available to reviewers? And at what stages of the review process? Reflection number 8. Has the Quora steering board the competence to lead the reform? Only 2 out of 11 members have published scientific works in the field of science, respectively with 34 publications, 422 citations, and 32 publications, 600 citations, public indexing scholars. Just to give a reference, there are speakers here in experts in research evaluation with over 5,000 citations. None has ever published an empirical work on research evaluation, although all members express views on the inadequacy of evaluative bibliomerics. Let's assume that Quora accomplishes its mission and proposes a reform of research assessment. What happens afterwards? Who will incorporate new scientific advances in research assessment? Reflection number 10. Is the quality of research, or is it its impact that should be assessed? In other words, think of a company producing a product. Is it the quality of that product that is of interest to the company, or its sales? Reviewers can assess quality based on originality, significance, and rigor. But what about the role of non-scientific factors in determining the impact of that research? Just to give you an idea, the share of a publication's extra domain citations is 62%, spanning 6 domains. That means that on average, a publication receives 62% of citation from domains outside the core of the publication itself. Citation-based metrics can assess scholarly impact. Neither can assess social impact, unless reviewers are economists and, in most cases, clairvoyant. There are specific contexts where peer review remains the sole option to assess research performance. In arts and humanities, because of the scarce coverage of bibliographic databases, and national research systems where a significant portion of research works is not indexed in bibliographic repositories. Scientometricians know that. In many other contexts, Scientometrics proved more suitable than peer review despite its inability to evaluate non-indexed works. In STEM, as I said, in countries where research primarily published in indexed publication, as the scale of the assessment expands. So in contexts where evaluative Scientometrics is applicable, is it more effective to assess research based on the quality of a limited number of works, including both indexed and non-indexed publication as proposed by Quora, or the scholarly impact of an unlimited number of index-only publications, which typically number about 4 times as many as those included in peer review assessments? I will articulate the comparison of the 2 methodologies across 6 critical dimensions: robustness, accuracy, validity, functionality, cost and time of execution, bias. Robustness. I read, peer review is the most robust method known for assessing quality. Wow. Everybody who publishes know about the differences in the evaluation by reviewers, frequent discrepancies in evaluation by different reviewers. Quality scores and rankings fluctuated when evaluating individuals and research units depending on the number of works assessed. Metrics-based assessment are slightly sensitive to the choice of the bibliographic repository, Web of Science or Scopus, so both are sensitive, but what's the extent of this sensitivity? Just to give you an idea, we conducted an exercise These are all Italian universities conducting research in physics, and we set up 8 different scenarios where we varied the number of works assessed. 10% of works, 20, 60, 80, so on. And you see here the variation of the position of each universities in the ranking. You see how ample are the variations. So there is no robustness at all. So then the question is, why rely on 2 referees when the entire scientific community acknowledges a work's significance through citations? Studies shows that early citations are better predictions of long-term scientific impact than peer-review quality scores. This is an evidence. And then there are lack of mechanisms for peer review to address multi-authorship, gender, or academic rank differences in research assessment. That is what I commented yesterday. You know how universities are ranked in the end. Well, okay, they sum the score of each publication and they compare it to the expected scores. Assuming that the top score is 1, then what's their total score as compared to 1? So it's a fraction. So it is not important whether an author of a university contributes just 10% of the overall publication, and 90% is the contribution of authors of another university. That counts full counting, while through fractional counting, through Scientometric, we are able to account for multi-authorship. So for gender, as I said yesterday, and also academic differences, know that full professors publish more than associate professors, publish more than assistant professors. And if you don't take into account this proportion, you are not going to have an accurate assessment. Validity. When you participate in national research assessment, you have to select the best products. But how effective are you in selecting the products? How is efficient the product? Studies show that the university-led selection has led to a reduction in the maximum achievable score in STEM by 23% to 32% compared to the result from a more efficient selection process. So in this peer review exercise, what is actually measuring is not the right quality of the true quality of the universities, but this is biased by the selection process. Consequences of limiting the number of works of peer reviewed. They can't do any individual level assessment. So organizations are unable to leverage national assessment outcomes for internal selective funding and individual reward schemes. And assessment-based funding systems allocate funds based on quality rather than productivity. By productivity, I mean scholar input per euro spent on research. This is what we measure in Italy. Cost and time of execution. Typical national peer review assessment exercises are conducted every 5 years. Take 2 to 3 years from initiation to publication of results. Limit frequency and efficacy for efficient research management and policy making. Scientometric performance assessment can be updated even daily if necessary, completed within few weeks. The cost significantly lower compared to peer review evaluation. UK's REF 2021 projected total costs were £471 million to distribute 2 billion research funds. Personal bias. Personal bias concerns product evaluations, reviewer selection, and those in charge of selection. How can reviewers be selected? And how do we select the selectors of reviewers? Through a peer review method. This is a catch-22. You can't do it. Okay. Without recourse to metrics, assuring effective selection becomes challenging. Qualitative judgment-based evaluation system reduce barriers to favoritism and discrimination. This is vital in recruitment, career advancement, and grant funding assessments, especially for female researchers. And it's really especially relevant in countries with widespread favoritism practices. Conclusions. In the 21st century, the era of artificial intelligence, advocating for peer-review-based research evaluation over scientometric methods seems outdated and counterproductive. Technology improvement tries to substitute labor wherever possible. And in this case, we are substituting the scarcest human resource in the world, which is scientists. And it seems contradictory that the same organizations responsible for the assessment Quora seeks to reform are entrusted with advancing research assessments. The competence of Quora steering board to lead the reform and the working groups to formulate it raises doubts. And now, rather than outright opposition, the current debate should center on how to prevent the use of metrics not in line with professional standards. And now I'm addressing the scientometrician community. The community of evaluated scientometricians should question the widespread concern regarding the misuse, gaming, drawbacks of current indicators, and then identify the major pitfalls that have been overlooked or insufficiently addressed. We should reflect on the apparent shortfall in the social impact of our research as indicated by the Quora initiative. We should then consider what steps can be taken to ensure that our recommendations for research policy and management are effectively implemented. You can find more detailed analysis in this paper that I wrote recently, The Forced Battle Between Peer Review and Scientometric Research Assessment, Why the Quora Initiative is Unsound. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your very thought-provoking talk. So I'm sure we're going to have a lot of comments and reactions. So over to the floor.
Thank you for that. Obviously, we've been following your work with some interest, and we responded yesterday, as you may have seen, with a blog post about some of the concerns that you've raised. But if I may, just a few reflections on your reflections, not on all of them, because obviously there's a lot there and you went through them very rapidly. But on reflection one around the fact that we've already got an epistemic community in research evaluation, why do we need a coalition of users? I would say, well, this isn't a coalition just of users. This is a coalition of those epistemic communities and of users. And it's important to have both in that community, because it's not just expertise that we need, it's those users of that expertise that need to kind of roll that expertise out into those evaluative settings, and that's what's been missing historically. So that's why it's important to have both. And we do have, so CWTS Leiden, other Scientometric scholars are all involved in the work quite closely in some of the working groups. So it's really important, I think, that those two groups work together to actually implement the expertise of these epistemic communities, which we absolutely don't doubt and highly value. We've also got this group on responsible metrics, of which the University of Cyprus is actually a member. So that's good news on that. On reflection two, I think a lot of the concerns about commitment to around the need to base assessment primarily on quantitative assessment tends to stop there. And forgets the second half of that commitment, which is to also to base assessment primarily on qualitative assessment, supported by the quantitative indicators, and that's a critical part of that balancing out. And I think I know we're having a conversation later about this, but the fact that peer review is time consuming is not a justification to throw it away and to move simply to kind of lazy shortcuts. We need to think about how we can combine both peer review and Scientometrics. And my personal view on this is that we need to assess less and better. So we assess far too much in the scholarly enterprise at the moment. And you're right, we're duplicating effort, and there's not enough capacity to do the level of peer review that's currently happening. So we need to think about, as a community, together how we can do that. On the competence question of the steering board members, trying not to take that personally, I think assessing steering board members based on their citations and publications is a bit ironic, given that that's exactly what CORA is trying to move away from and to challenge. We do have 4 full professors, 5 PhDs on that board, but I would say if you don't think we're competent, join us. There's absolutely no barrier to you or other scientometricians joining that steering board. In fact, we can welcome that very much. Just final point on peer review versus Scientometrics. I think this is a false dichotomy, as I said. We're not trying to argue one is better than the other. Again, my personal view is that we try and sell a message that there is some kind of truth in research assessment, and I think that's just John, what you was saying this morning. All assessments are just an approximation. There is no truth in research assessment.
Mm-hmm.
We need to work together to try and identify a best and most robust form of developing those proxies for the sorts of things that we actually value in assessment. And it was great to see in your final slide, you kind of making reference to societal impact, which obviously isn't currently assessed through citation measures and a lot of other things that we care about in terms of scholarly enterprise are not assessed by citations either. So I think there's a lot of common ground. I think there's a lot of common ground between the scientometric community's perspectives and the work of CORA. And I just hope that we can kind of move forward together rather than seeing this as an argument or an irresolvable issue.
I need time, another 30 minutes to answer you all your points. I mean, as for the users, I make a distinction between science and the application of science. I'm not saying that members of the steering board are not competent, but that they are competent on something different than research evaluation. That is what I'm saying, apart from a couple of exceptions. That is what I'm saying. And this is shown by their publications. I mean, if you have a biochemist, I respect him as a biochemist, but not as a research evaluation expert. So that's the point. And then the question is, why weren't scientometricians engaged from the very beginning of this process? I mean, of course, if one of the funders states that measures took us to a blind alley, there is little space left for scientometricians. Now, I'm very definite about this point. I think in research assessment, given the current technologies available, as I said, in arts and humanities, and in those countries where a significant portion of research works are not indexed in bibliographic databases, should be assessed via peer review. No doubts about it. But in all other countries, and in STEM, that is in 75% of overall research, the scientometric method is the method to assess research at when the scale is growing. That is university level, national level, and so on. There is no doubt about it. That's my point of view. And it is I can produce evidence, if you read my paper, about my arguments about this. So there is no, I mean, I talk basing my arguments on scientific evidence, but I don't see the same by Coara. On which premises you base your statement that research assessment should be primarily conducted via peer review?
Well, we already have quite a few hands, but may I chip in for literally 20 seconds? First, I'm not sure I 100% agree, but I guess it was a matter of emphasis and provoking thought with Giovanni that it's an issue of peer review versus Scientometric. So at the end of the day, whenever we make an assessment of an individual scientist, say to hire, there is a committee, there are colleagues, we judge the personality, we judge the person, so there is the element of peer review. Secondly, I don't know what's going on with me today. I'll come back to that. Let's proceed with Alexia.
Thank you for that. Very thought-provoking. Okay, I have a lot of comments, but I know we don't have time, so I'm not going to go through all of them. I'm just going to say two things. One is your analogy about the use of antibiotics is really interesting, but inherent in that is a value judgment, and that is that this is a good thing, kind of like antibiotics are a good thing. For me, the analogy is more equivalent to guns. So your question of, well, does this lie, does the honest lie with the use of with antibiotics or with those who overuse antibiotics? Well, I would rephrase that to, does the honest lie with the users of guns or guns themselves? So the analogy for me is more equivalent to what the NRA says in the US, that we shouldn't really be blaming guns, but so we don't need to control guns, but we need to control the users of guns, right? So if I follow through that analogy, then for me, the value judgment in what you're saying is very implicit. In other words, even if we agree, what are we doing about the users of these guns, even as we fail to problematize the existence of guns or metrics or whatever it is in our discussion? And that's my first point. So my second point is in regards to social impact, and you're saying that we cannot assess it. I think what you're probably saying behind that word is that it's difficult to measure. So it's not like we can't assess social impact, because we live social impact of discoveries, of research, of studies, we live it because that's our progress. Now, if it's difficult to measure it, is actually another question, and maybe we need to find better ways of assessing. So I have a lot of points, but
Okay. I skipped the first reaction, and I leave it to you. And it's yeah, no.
it's a good thing necessary.
I think metrics are a good thing. There's antibiotics. So and guns can be a good thing as well when you have to defend yourself, right? When you have no other right. I hope you won't defend yourself from metrics. And then the second point was about just something. Assessing social impact. It depends. As Professor Ioannidis said, I challenge every of you to assess the social impact of your last 5 years publications. Can you do that? It's impossible. I mean, it's impossible. What are we talking about? You cannot assess socioeconomic impact. You have to, there is a process. You have a research output, then it is to be integrated into a technology. A technology is to be brought to the market, and somebody has to buy it in order to have a social economic impact. Otherwise, you don't have it. So how long does it take before you get that? There is no time. We need timeliness assessment for research management and research policy decisions. We can't wait decades. To give you an example, Stratienberg at MIT is very famous in Israel. Is kind of very high position in research institution. He spent 5 years of his PhD program to write a thesis on the socioeconomic impact of the CAT scanner. 5 years. And the CAT scanner was already in the market. And that, to answer your point, Zacharias, of course, I mean, the way I conceive research assessment is like in the clinical medicine, we provide X-rays for the doctor, the physician, and then together with other information, he decides. But it depends on the level of analysis. At the individual level, you have the time to do that. And then, but at the national level, at the university level, how you can enter these details? It's impossible. I mean, you need proxies, and you have to do with it. I mean,
so it's so thought-provoking. I think I'm gonna take a couple of more questions. Let me just chip in again for 10 seconds. The rep, for example, in the UK, does approximate social impact, maybe very imperfectly, by using case studies. But you know, they have weaknesses. I think Sophronis had the question before.
All right. Okay. So actually, I thought the gun analogy also. Yeah. I thought the gun analogy is better than the vaccines. Okay, I mean, there's lots of things that we raised. I will just focus on one point. So you say that with subjective review there's bias, and there's the issue of who selects the reviewers and who selects the selectors to select the reviewers. And I'm very sympathetic to that. Actually, my work that I mentioned yesterday, if you were here, was a paper that looked at the UK RAE, and we actually found evidence of bias in favor of the universities associated with members of the panel. So I understand that. But then, don't you think that the same problem exists when you have to select metrics? I mean, somebody has to select the metrics, somebody has to construct them, somebody has to create the formulas that want to aggregate the metrics into some other indices and so forth. So again, it's the same problem, it doesn't really go away. And it's even worse, possibly, in the case of metrics, because you end up with, lots of people, you're a data guy, and I'm a data guy, and maybe I can understand, I can follow what you're doing, but lots of people are not data people, not everybody can understand the metrics. So you end up with a black box that lots of people don't understand, and then that's what you use in the end. So is that something we should be worried about?
When I go to my physician for a health problem, and he explains to me what I should do and why, I do not pretend to understand everything. And although I am a research scientist, I mean, he's my physician. He knows it, and I trust him. So we need to have more trust in scientists in general. I mean, in this case, we are scientists in metrics, and we cannot expect that everybody understands every single metric. I mean, that we are aware of the limits assumptions that we make when we conduct bibliometric research assessment, and we have to tell the user what are the limits and the accuracy level of our assessment and so on. I don't see, I don't see metrics as something that you can take out of the shelf and apply. Research assessment is a complex procedure, and you have to agree on the research assessment which best tailors the user's need. So it depends on what, I mean, research assessment is, I look at it from the strategic management perspective. If you have a strategy, then you have objectives that you want to achieve, and then through the research assessment, you measure the achievement of those objectives. But every university can have, or every country can have different strategies. So that's something which is to be tailored, formulated according to the customer's need.
Let's take a final question by Marco, who has raised their hand already.
Okay, so yeah, I think there's a bit of a provocation here, and I can see the sides. But on the other one hand, there is, the review process is imperfect, it's noisy, there are biases, but also it's important to acknowledge, and maybe I haven't heard much here, that the citations also are, are measuring something, but there are incentives behind citations, and I think it would be nice to know more. And I see this is a great incentive to go forward in the science that you're pushing forward and talk more to the broader community and understand better as well what's behind citations and improve the metrics, which I think is what you'd like to do. I think completely eliminating them might not be the solution in my view, but improving them I'm very much in favor. And I think understanding what's behind both the review process better as well as citation process better. I don't think much has been done on that.
I agree. I mean, this is what we have been doing for decades, improving research assessment metrics. And we are aware of the limit. It's like a robotic surgeon. I mean, the fact that a surgeon applies robotics, it doesn't mean that he doesn't know about surgery, but he knows when he can use robotics and when he cannot use it. And this is what we do, what we are aware of as scientometricians.
So, we're going to move to the next set of speakers. I apologize for delay. Thanks for your patience, but I hope you have enjoyed the conversation so far.